Now to the latest on the crisis on the border and efforts by these states to take control of a situation that the federal government can or just won't get under control. In Texas, Governor Greg Abbott has vowed to continue installing razor wire on the Mexico border in defiance of a new Supreme Court ruling that federal Border Patrol agents can, for now, remove the wire. Governor Abbott said on Wednesday that Texas's right to self-defense from the migrant invasion supersedes any federal laws. As Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick put it, don't mess with Texas. We're joined now by former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, the host of Huckabee here on TBN. Governor, once again, thanks for joining us here on Centerpoint.
Great to be with you, Joe. You know, it's interesting. 26 other governors from 26 states have all said they're standing with Texas. I think that's very significant. You have more than half of the governors in the country who recognize that if Texas is run over by this federal mandate, then every state might as well just fold up and say we are nothing more than a puppet of the federal government. And nobody should want that if they're constitutionalist.
That's exactly right. Open borders for everyone, right? Let's talk about the governors doing that, because Texas's neighbor, Arkansas, how would you have handled this situation? And what is a governor's responsibility?
Well, the governor's first responsibility is the safety and protection of his or her constituents. So what Governor Abbott is doing and what these other governors are standing for is that for them to do their constitutional duty, a duty to their state constitution and to the federal constitution, they've got to make sure that they enforce the law. And if the federal government refuses to enforce the existing law, and this federal government has ignored the law, has refused to acknowledge it, refused to enforce it, then to protect their own citizens, they have no choice but to do what they can. That's why they have the razor wire. I think it's a fascinating show between the lawlessness of the Biden administration and their complete indifference to what's happening at the border, and a state that says, look, we can't handle this. We have millions, not thousands, millions of illegal people coming into the country. We have no idea who they are, where they've come from, why they're coming, and what they're going to do when they get here. And are they criminals? And we have a right to know that. In fact, we have a responsibility to know that. So what we're seeing is a real clash between the federal and state will. I think the Supreme Court made a stupid decision. But let me throw this caveat out, Joe. They didn't say that the Border Patrol must go and remove the wire. They only said they could. They may realize it's not in their best interest to do that.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up about the Biden administration, because they're arguing that the border is federal property and the border enforcement is their job. Who do you think ends up winning this fight, Governor?
Well, I hope the people do when the Biden administration finally recognizes that it has miserably and intentionally failed at the border, and that Texas is simply doing what it must do to protect its citizens. This is like if you're standing on the corner and you see an elderly lady having the daylights beaten out of her by some young punk. The question is, do you intervene? Do you try to save that lady, or you just say, you know what, I'm not a police officer, I don't have a badge, I don't have a gun, so if that lady gets beaten to the point of death, then I'm sorry, but it's not my problem. Greg Abbott is saying, I'm watching this incredible situation unfold, and I'm not going to be a bystander and allow it to happen without trying to intervene, because his citizens are being murdered by the fentanyl crisis. His kids, teenagers and youngsters, are being exploited in sex trafficking. But here's the reality. This is no longer a border issue state. This is happening in all 50 states. The drugs, the sex trafficking, the extraordinary costs, you're seeing it in cities like New York, Chicago, Washington, D.C., they can't handle it. They admit they can't handle it. And everybody gets it but Joe Biden. And he folds his arms and says, it's too bad. Let them keep coming. It's absurd.
Yep, it's all under his watch. Immigration, Governor, is emerging as a major crisis for President Biden. Just from an optics angle, why would President Biden go into an election year with this topic on the mind of voters, knowing his rival is going to remind voters that he actually made attempts to stop the flow of illegals and will do it again?
You know, Joe, that's the inexplicable part of this. The only thing I can figure is that Joe Biden really doesn't understand how bad it is. Let's face it, he's not been to the border. He doesn't go down there and look at it. He doesn't listen to the people who are there. He seems indifferent to it. So maybe he's not fully understanding what this issue is. It was 70% issue in New Hampshire in the primary. New Hampshire is about as far from the southern border as a person can get. So if they think it's the biggest issue in New Hampshire, imagine how people in Arizona, California, Texas, New Mexico, and many of the other border states are feeling.